Welcome to Your Health Reset, where we address the real root causes behind health issues today to get you rapid results on your health journey so you can be who you came here to be, mind, body, and spirit. I'm your host, Sinclair Kennally, survivor of complex chronic illness, expert on resolving root causes, and co-founder of Detox Rejuvenation and Meditation RX. Let's get started.
Welcome back. We're continuing our conversation about root causes and rapid results. I'm your host, Sinclair Kennally, and today I am joined by the wonderful Dr. Navaz Habib. We are going to be unpacking all things vagus nerve today. And before we do, I want to just give Dr. Navaz a chance to just talk about your story and really introduce yourself because you're quite the expert in this field. And I think you're really inspiring.
I appreciate that. And obviously it's very well received. So thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to jump into my story because it's an important journey that brought me to where I am and a lot of personal stuff that I've gone through that kind of took me down this path. So my journey really begins when I was in chiropractic college. I graduated in 2010 from my chiropractic college here in Toronto. I live in Canada. And at the time when I graduated, I was lucky enough and honored to be elected valedictorian of my class. And I remember standing on stage in front of about 1,500 people, including all of my classmates and their loved ones that were there celebrating our graduation. And as I was giving the speech, I remember feeling like something was not right. And it had to do with the fact that I had just graduated or I was graduating from a college that taught me all about health. And yet I was standing there weighing 250 pounds. I was dealing with high blood pressure. I was borderline diabetic and I had my own health struggles that were really affecting me personally. And this was in my 20s. And I had just learned how to deal with a lot of these things and how to share this positive information with my own patients going forward. And yet I wasn't doing it for myself. And I had this feeling of being an imposter. That imposter syndrome set in really early for me. And my journey took a little while. My wife and I, at the time, we were just dating. But then once we got married, we started to go down this path of how do we get healthier? Because when we do want to have kids, we don't want them to have to deal with the same challenges that we do. And we started doing some work with regards to weight management, calorie counting, this type, that type. And I remember having minimal results and not really getting anywhere with it and not really loving what I was doing with that. It wasn't helping me to feel better. But there was a single instance where everything shifted. And that was when I was standing at a spot in one of the clinics that I was working at. This was a couple of years after I had graduated. And a gentleman walked into the office, and I'm rarely in that office and rarely at the spot that I was at when he walked in and he said to the ladies at the front desk that he himself was a chiropractor, but his wife was in a car accident, but he doesn't practice chiropractic anymore. And I was standing there and I said, if you're a chiropractor, what else do you do? And he said, I practice functional medicine. And I remember my mind just being blown and saying, wait, what is that? Like, tell me about this. And he went into an office to speak to another chiropractor. In the meantime, I jumped on my computer and checked what is functional medicine. And I was immediately just shocked as to what this was. So I ran out of my office and waited for him to come out. And I followed this gentleman across back to where he was walking outside of the office and asked him to teach me what functional medicine was. And that gentleman was Sachin Patel, a wonderful functional medicine practitioner and amazing mentor of mine. And such a chance encounter that led me down this path. He taught me about the idea of what health truly was, that it wasn't merely the absence of disease, but the creation of optimal function within our own bodies. That we couldn't create health unless we addressed the root cause, the why of why the challenges were happening in the first place. And he taught me through this journey and mentored me through my own challenges and my own health. And I was able to eliminate a whole ton of excess weight and get rid of all of my health challenges that were affecting me in my 20s to the point that I needed to share this with the rest of the world. And that's when I got into functional medicine. And a big piece of that puzzle for me was understanding that everything was connected, that every area of our body, every cell within our body is speaking to every other cell within our body. And I always wondered what that was, but I remembered back to chiropractic college that there was a particular nerve that was connected to basically everything. Almost every organ in our entire body is connected through the vagus nerve. It always stuck out to me as being intriguing. It was different than any other nerve within the body. And so that's what really had me sit back and say, I need to learn more about this. I need to share this with the world and work on connecting different parts of our body to one another and show people how that connection is built. And so that's what brought me into understanding more about the vagus nerve.
And I love that story. It tells a dear friend and colleague of mine. So talk to me about, first, let's define the vagus nerve, because we have two people in our audience, right? Generally, we've got the newbies who are just taking back control of their health. Hey, hi guys, so glad you're here. And everything is new and exciting, and going from that survivor mode of hoping that a white coat is going to fix it and that despair when they realize they're not, to, hey, I'm going to take control for myself. So we need to define the vagus nerve and what it does for us and what happens when it's not functioning well for those guys. And then, of course, we have my gluten-free yogis who still feel like crap. So those guys know more of their own health picture than most practitioners that they sit down with. And so I want to give both audiences some wonderful nuggets today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think vagus nerve is one of those topics that can be given to both of those groups. And so we'll do a bit of work there. We'll start with the basics, because that's really the only place to start when it comes to the vagus nerve and when it comes to the autonomic nervous system overall. So let's start really simply. The autonomic nervous system is a part of our brain and body control over the processes within our body that automatically occur, that we don't consciously have control over. These are things like your breathing, your heart rate, your digestion, your liver detoxification, your kidney detoxification, the maintenance of your electrolytes, all of the things that keep you in a state of homeostasis that you don't consciously need to think about. Homeostasis meaning essentially balance. And this system is called the autonomic nervous system. And there's two parts to the autonomic nervous system. We have the sympathetic part of the autonomic nervous system, which controls your fight and flight. And this is where most people are spending a whole ton of their time, way more than we ever have been in the past. And something that's driving us into this area of fight or flight more often than not. We're sitting in a stressful environment. We're sitting in an environment where certain processes within our body are not turned on because we're in that stressful state, being turning off digestion, turning your heart rate up, turning your breath rate up, not allowing you to take calm, deep breaths, not allowing your liver to detoxify because it's just focused on your survival under stressful circumstances. Will I be able to get away from the threat that I am under right now so I can survive and then move on and potentially be able to continue living? That's what the sympathetic nervous system is heavily worried about. The other side of this is the parasympathetic nervous system. And that is the nervous system of rest and digest. And I've added one more, and that is recover. Rest, digest, and recover. And this is where we should be spending most of our time, but unfortunately, most of us do not. And this is where our digestion turns on. This is where our heart rate comes down. This is where we can get into that calm, deep, diaphragmatic breathing. We'll talk a lot about breathing today. This is where our body functions more commonly and more fully within a state of homeostasis and balance when we're in that parasympathetic side of the autonomic nervous system more often than not. And the parasympathetic nervous system, for the vast majority of our body, is mediated or signaled through the vagus nerve. Now, if we look really quickly at the anatomy of the vagus nerve, is the 10th cranial nerve. We have 12 pairs of cranial nerves. We have two vagus nerves, one on the right, one on the left. And both of these come out just behind the ear within the brainstem. Right behind, you'll feel a bit of a bone here called the mastoid process right behind your ear. If you go down right behind there, and if you go to where you feel your pulse, you're actually touching your vagus nerve. It comes down through your neck. Sends a few branches to a few areas that we'll talk about. One to the ear, the skin of the ear. It sends some branches to the muscles at the back of the throat and to the muscles around your voice box, around your larynx. So it's actually sending signals to the muscles to create pitch and tone in my voice, which is why I can go really low or really high with my voice. So your vagus nerve is doing that. If you have a bit of a monotone voice, you might have an issue with the vagus nerve. So that's an interesting little clinical tidbit. As it comes on down through the neck, it actually courses alongside your carotid artery and your jugular vein. These are the two probably most important blood vessels within your body that send blood to your brain and from your brain. So this is how we connect our blood flow to the brain. And there's only three structures that sit together in an area called the carotid sheath. That's the carotid artery, the jugular vein, and the vagus nerve. Should tell you how important that nerve really is when we realize anatomically where it's placed. It's the only other cranial nerve that leaves the cranial cavity, meaning the head area. And then it goes down into the thorax, into the chest area, where it sends innervation to bathe those blood vessels that it's coursing alongside to measure blood pressure. It goes down to the heart, where it sends signals to help lower the heart rate. It goes down to the lungs, where it measures stretch and tends to see just how much we're breathing, how expansive our lungs can be. Another important tidbit will go down there as well. Continues on down through the esophagus into past the diaphragm. So this is important. It doesn't innervate the diaphragm directly, but it's involved in diaphragmatic function. And then it goes down into the abdomen, where it then innervates essentially every organ of our abdominal cavity. Stomach, small intestine, large intestine, pancreas, spleen, kidney, you name it, gallbladder. Everything is innervated by the vagus nerve. There is a heavy connection to this entire system internally. And this is where the vagus nerve does something that's different than any other nerve, is that it connects so many different pieces of our massive, amazing, wonderful body together. And that's why it's so important.
What an amazing overview for folks who are both familiar with or just getting to know their vagus nerve. So let's talk about some of the ways that this phenomenal self-regulating piece to our entire health picture can get off track or can get dysregulated. What are some of the root causes of disruption for vagus nerve function?
Yeah, this is a great question. I've alluded to one already, and that's probably the most common and the one that I think we need to look at more often than not. And that is your breathing. Too many of us breathe dysfunctionally. Okay. And what that means essentially is that we're not using the right muscles for our breathing. We've forgotten how to breathe correctly. This is something that was pointed out by Joseph Pilates when he was writing his initial work, by yogis for thousands of years. We've heard about this and yet never really took it to heart. Too many of us breathe using our chest. We start breathing with their accessory breathing muscles. The reason why so many people have tight muscles in their upper back, in addition to our horrendous posture of sitting in front of our laptops and our cell phones all day, we then breathe using these muscles. We're not in a correct posture to allow for our diaphragm to be doing the job that it needs to do. So a really quick test to see if you're breathing correctly or not. I'll say about 50% of people will be able to catch it pretty quickly. I'll have everybody put a hand on their chest and a hand on their belly. Okay. And you're going to take a deep breath in and you're going to check as you breathe in and out to see which hand is moving. If it's the hand on your chest that's moving forward and backwards with an expanse on the inhale and back in on the exhale, it means that you're breathing dysfunctionally. It means that you're breathing with your chest and you're not breathing with your diaphragm. You're not breathing with your belly. Most commonly, people are not breathing well. And this is an important factor that leads to dysfunction of the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve needs movement and toning in order to be turned on. And when we breathe with our diaphragm, we create stretch in our lungs, meaning that our stretch receptors in our vagus nerve get turned on. We create motion patterns in the organs below the diaphragm. That includes all of the digestive organs. We're actually creating almost a massaging effect with the diaphragm when we are breathing correctly. Diaphragmatic breathing is the best way to turn your system from sympathetic to parasympathetic. There's no question about it. That's been proven over and over in the science, been practiced for thousands of years. And this is something that if you learn to do it on a regular basis, especially when you feel the stressors coming on and be able to pull yourself back towards that parasympathetic state, breathing is one of the most common reasons why we're out of function, but it's also one of the best ways to get back into parasympathetic.
What a great summary. Totally agree. It's so overlooked and it's free. It's free, guys. I think back to when I was really ill and this chronic stress that I had, and I was attributing my physical symptoms to this anxiety and depression and stress. And I was just like, oh, life is hard. Life is hard. And that's why I don't feel good. And in a very real way, that was very true because I was shallow breathing. And I was in a state of like collapse and tension all the time. And then that was intensifying as I started to take on like really intense fibromyalgia and stuff. But it's one of the first things we always look at with somebody who comes to us, whether it's in our practice or students. We'll watch and people are breathing very shallowly. And if you invite the attention to the breath, it actually deepens like almost immediately. Like just bringing your attention to the breath. I don't know how to do it. Just bring your attention to it, gently observe. It is the perfect way to start because your body will ask for a deeper breath as soon as you do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something that, like, I practice it with my daughters. So I have 2 young daughters, one who's too young to understand this quite yet, and one who is 5 years old and gets emotional from time to time. And when that emotion becomes too much, we notice that her breathing goes directly to her chest and she becomes really shallow and needs to get really chilled out because she's just too riled up. And so what I'll have her do is I'll do exactly what I just did with everybody here, but I'll do it in a different position. I'll have her lay down on her back and I'll say, there's 2 balloons in your body. You have 1 balloon on your chest and you have 1 balloon in your belly. And right now I want you to blow up the balloon in your belly. And I'll put my hand on her belly and I'll say, I need to feel this balloon blowing up every time you breathe in and this balloon falling every time you breathe out. And without fail, every single time, if she's able to shift her breath to her belly, she's able to get back into that calmer state. It's something that happens so early in life. It's something that's shocking to me that it happened before she was 5 years old, that I could see that shift in her breath and towards the chest. That it's something that we've been trained to essentially be doing from a very early age. So if we can train our kids and train ourselves to do this early on, then we can actually have a long-term positive effect when we affect it early.
That's such a great point. Yeah. Totally agree. We do all of our live class teachings. We start with a breath piece and we end with a breath piece. Got to do nervous system support so the information actually gets in.
And what's really cool about that, because you mentioned it, I just want to bring that up, is when we go into a parasympathetic state, we actually shift where our blood flow goes. And this is really cool. And that's blood flow within the brain. So what happens when we are in a short, shallow, sympathetic breath pattern is our blood flow goes to our lizard brain, to our hindbrain. And this is our survival mechanism. This is just making sure that we stay alive. When we go into a parasympathetic, deep breathing state, our blood flow actually shifts to our prefrontal cortex. We actually
literally get smarter.
Able to take in executive function and actually think more clearly when you're in a parasympathetic state. You literally become smarter when you breathe better. Such a cool little tidbit that we can add in today.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Fantastic. Okay, so what are some other things that can disrupt vagus nerve function? What are those root causes?
Very important ones. And essentially, it comes down to things that trigger inflammation within the body. Okay. Now, part of that function of the parasympathetic nervous system, part of that function of the vagus nerve is controlling inflammation or keeping our immune system balanced so that it's able to manage the inflammatory response to certain triggers. Okay. So these triggers can include inflammatory foods. How many people have that standard American diet, or they're having too many carbs, or they're having low quality fats, or they're just taking in foods that are creating an inflammatory balance within their body? That's triggering inflammatory microbiome changes. And that's affecting the inflammation that's coming in through the gut, which again, the gut heavily innervated by the vagus nerve. So this is an important piece. This is where some of that excess inflammation comes in, is through dietary issues. And that'll create those microbiome imbalances, and those inflammatory foods in combination will lead to excess inflammatory reaction. Another one here is if you have some sort of physical trauma, something like a concussion or a car accident or a whiplash, something like that can create a physical strain on the vagus nerve, but it's also very inflammatory within the brain. Now, what's really cool, and I haven't talked a lot about this, but it's becoming more and more relevant, is that the vagus nerve sends signals down into all of these organs within our body, but it actually also sends signals up via the brainstem to the central nervous system. And when we have some sort of physical trauma, like a concussion or a whiplash injury, the inflammation that's going on within the brain needs to also be controlled. And signaling through the vagus nerve actually helps to eliminate a lot of the inflammation that's going on within the brain as well. If you're dealing with something like a brain fog or a chronic fatigue syndrome or some sort of migraines or cluster headaches secondary to some sort of physical trauma, vagus nerve function is often compromised. So this is a really important piece of the puzzle here for a lot of these people when you're suffering from these challenges.
It's such a great point. I think back on my own journey, and it's part of why I tried to be really intentional about how we structure each interview and each piece of learning content for folks, because I know when you're not feeling well, you're literally less smart than you actually are underneath all of that and on the other side of your illness. It really does all come back, guys. Just trust me, because I couldn't read an email. I couldn't write a sentence. I would be in meetings. I would have no idea what was going on. I had no short-term memory. It was really scary. And it all came back. But it's when I think back, I was in 11 car accidents and it was just like whiplash after whiplash. And then you add in sprinkles and mold and some heavy metals and you got yourself a really fun dysfunctioning brain.
Yeah, it's like a cauldron of little things that you can put together that'll create a whole inflammatory cascade within your body. And that often is what sets off this vagus nerve dysfunction and the inability to manage inflammation, because you can't manage the inflammation. That's when it becomes chronic. That's when it gets to the point of we're being diagnosed with something that is some sort of inflammatory condition. And we know that there's a root cause to it. We need to look back at what that root cause is, but our body's response to that cause is dictated by our vagus nerve. And so addressing that vagus nerve piece is going to help us address that chronic inflammatory reaction that's occurring, give us those rapid results that we're really looking for, and move us back towards being able to address that root cause without the challenges. So this is, for me, one of those missing pieces for a lot of people that have gotten 40 functional lab tests to tell them what's wrong, but they still have the inflammation going on, is they haven't addressed that missing piece of how does our body manage that inflammation? Is the vagus nerve working well enough to do that?
I'm so glad you just said that. It's really essential. I actually want people to go back and listen to it. Rewind 2 minutes and listen to that whole piece again, because that's really the crux of the whole thing that we're talking about here.
Yeah.
So when I listen to that, I always go to, when we think about the disruptors to health itself, people get very fixated on, oh, I'm finally sick enough that I have a label to it. And that's what's wrong with me. But actually, this label has nothing to do with what's wrong with you. It's merely a descriptor. It's a constellation of symptoms. It's a triangulation of what is presenting, but it has nothing to do with assessing the root cause. So what are some other root causes that you think are overlooked when it comes to vagus nerve dysregulation?
It's a great question. We've talked about breath. We've talked about physical trauma. We've talked about biochemical trauma being that dietary piece to the puzzle. I would go as far as to say that we've covered the major pieces, but one of the more common ones that I see is for sure mold. This is something that can affect your ability to manage inflammation really well. And because it can be so pervasive and so hidden for a lot of people, it could very well be that piece that triggers such a heavy inflammatory reaction internally, leading to that dysregulation, that nervous dysregulation. What we then are seeing is challenges with vagus nerve function overall. And when it gets to a really bad point, this is where we get to dysautonomia. This is where we get to the inability to physically control like our blood pressure. We stand up and we have this orthostatic hypotension. We feel this fainting feeling of needing to sit down immediately or we might faint. These are dysautonomia type symptoms and very commonly found in conjunction with mold.
Yeah. Thank you so much for saying that. So few people draw that connection. I think it's one of those overlooked treasure troves, actually, in functional medicine. I know that sounds weird to say, guys, but when you start realizing that as soon as you find the original issues, that everything starts to become possible again, you get really excited to talk about poison. That's what happened to me. Look, we've been poisoned. Let's unpack it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So let's make sure that we talk about what can we do about this in terms of how you approach this.
Yeah, it's a really important kind of next step here. And so once we understand what the vagus nerve does, what it involves, what it manages, and how it manages that, then we can do a bit of work to support it. And so I talk about the physical connections that the vagus nerve has as being those areas where you can really hack it, where you can really work to upgrade that nerve and make it work really well. So first off, we can test to see how our vagus nerve is functioning, which is a really important marker. And there's a few ways to do this. Number one, a really simple, very cheap way to do this is to go and get a set of white sesame seeds from any health food store or bulk store or whatever, grocery store. And don't get too many, just get enough for the test. And basically you take a teaspoon to a tablespoon's worth of white sesame seeds and you put it into a glass of water and you drink that water without chewing those seeds down. I'm going to tell you why they have to be white in a moment, because you're going to mark down the time when you take in those seeds, and then you're going to start to mark down when you start to see them in the toilet bowl. You want them white so you can see them. That's an important factor here. And we don't want to chew down those seeds because then we will start to digest them. But when the shell is still on those seeds, we are unable to break those down. And so you can actually test your digestive tract sequencing time, essentially, how long it takes from when you ingest something to when you start to see it and when you finish seeing it in your stools, to tell you how well your digestive tract is working. This isn't a direct marker of your vagus nerve function, but it will give you some indication of your digestive system function, which is heavily correlated to vagus nerve. What we're looking for in an optimal scenario is that you start and finish seeing those seeds within 16 to 20 hours of ingestion. That's an optimal time. Anywhere between 12 to 24 hours, you're doing okay. 16 to 20 being optimal. Anything shorter than 12 hours, we know that things are moving way too quickly through. And anything longer than 24 hours tells us that we're likely taking too long and things are either backed up due to either a physical issue or some sort of neuro issue, which could very well be the vagus nerve not allowing movement to occur. So that's a really simple tool that you can use. The best marker for vagus nerve dysfunction is heart rate variability. It's different from heart rate. Heart rate is indicated through vagus nerve. The lower your heart rate, closer to that 45 to 65 number, the better it is. If you get up to a resting heart rate over 70, we know that vagus nerve isn't doing a great job in your resting state. But heart rate variability is an actual measurement of the number of milliseconds between beats of the heart averaged over a period of time. And that tells us how much signaling is coming from the sympathetic side versus the parasympathetic side. This is the gold standard for measuring vagus nerve function. And what's awesome is a lot of people have wearable devices that actually measure this already. And this is something that's coming out more and more. I wear my Oura ring every day. I've been wearing it for about 4 years now. So I have tons of data and I can tell you within a few points how far my HRV is off that next morning. So I've started to, that interoception has really taken hold in me personally, which is awesome. But there's tools out there. There's, I believe Apple Watch is now doing it, or the Whoop Band is an awesome tool. There's so many that are out there that can help you measure what heart rate variability is. And the higher your heart rate variability, the more active your vagus nerve is, the stronger vagal tone you have. What we're looking at on average, and this is, everybody's going to be a little bit different here. Your goal is to elevate your HRV as much as you physically possibly can. If we're seeing an HRV under 30, it's a sign, under 30 milliseconds, it's a sign that you're not in a parasympathetic state very often, and that you're quite low. You're actually far more in a sympathetic state. If we're between kind of that 40 to 65 area, It's a sign that we're doing better. It's not phenomenal, but you're pretty good, especially if you're not an athlete. Anything over that 70 marker, 70 to 120, that's a sign of really strong vagus nerve function, that you're in a good parasympathetic state all the time. So just as a quick little tool, if you're measuring your HRV, this is for the people that have devices and want to know everything and are full statisticians. HRV, you want to get that number into those 60s, 70s, 80s. That's a very, very good sign that you're getting into that parasympathetic state really effectively. Now, how do we hack this? How do we make sure that level goes up? It's managing stress. It's managing how we respond under stressful circumstances so that we are able to recover and take on new challenges the next day. Okay. The number one way, again, to hack this is through your breath. And so every single time you get an opportunity or you remember and you catch yourself breathing with your chest, take a moment and get into nasal breathing in through the nose and slow exhales. The slower you exhale, the more diaphragmatic function you're creating and the more vagus nerve activation you're getting as well. So if you can do a 4-second inhale, pause for a few seconds, and then an 8-second exhale, that's a very good way to push yourself into that parasympathetic state pretty effectively. Okay.
Such a great point. And remembering to empty out all the way, because people say, I'm stuck with a shallow breath. I can't do anything about it. I don't know how. It's empty out that bottom third of the lungs.
Exactly. What's awesome is visualization of that, in fact, as well. If you're thinking about it and you're saying, okay, how do I do this? Visualize what the bottom third of the lungs look like and visualize it actually happening. And over time, you can train it to manifest and actually happen more effectively. And so that's a really great way to, if you're having trouble doing that, if I'm saying, oh, I just can't get rid of it. Yeah, you can, if you just learn how to do it really effectively. Train yourself.
Awesome. Love that.
You want to take that to the next level. How do you then make breathing even harder under stress? How do you train yourself that when you're under stress, you can still maintain that good diaphragmatic breathing?
Is this where we're going to start talking about ice buckets?
Where we're going. So I'm
ice.
I'll slowly dip into the ice bucket, but
I'm not a fan. I try. I do. More or less.
We can start with cold showers. This is where we can add a little bit of tension, add a little bit of stress, and know that you can turn it off if you don't like it and it just doesn't work for you. But the same way that a weightlifter increases the weight that they're able to lift by doing back squats without any weight on a bar versus them adding 50 pounds on and 100 pounds on and being able to elevate and strengthen that exercise, we can do that with our breathing as well. When we can breathe diaphragmatically under stress, we can do things that you couldn't even imagine. And I've physically felt this. So if you start to train yourself with finishing your shower with 30 seconds of cold, turning that knob as cold as it physically can go, and letting it hit you on a sensitive spot. For most people, it's like head or back of the neck. That's where it gets me. You'll immediately go into the stressful state. And you'll go into this tension and this tightness and this, I need to breathe through with my chest. And what you need to do is let that go. You're going to let your arms go on the side, open up the fists, and let the shoulders drop and focus on your diaphragm breathing while you're getting that cold shower on you. You realize it gets to be a whole lot easier. And now you actually, or I do at least, enjoy my cold showers.
I like my cold showers about 5 months out of the year. I get less good at it.
The winter time as well. So I absolutely get that. You want to go even further? This is where the cold plunge or some sort of ice bucket plunge is one of the coolest things. Now,
so true.
My record is 5 minutes in an ice bath doing deep breathing. It came out, I was shivering like a crazy person. But 5 minutes in there, my dopamine levels were through the roof. I just felt phenomenal. I was activated. I was ready to go, but in a parasympathetic, happy way. It's a really cool feeling to be turned, like mentally turned on and physically be like shivering. Oh my God, what is happening to my body? But just that mental ability to say, It's almost like doing a personal record, a PR deadlift. And you're like, yes, I did this. I'm so excited about it. It's like doing 5 minutes.
It really is interesting, like the sense of accomplishment. Like, yes, I sat in a tub of water for a couple minutes, but it is. It's a phenomenal feeling.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And it gets easier as you keep doing it. It sucks to get in that first step in there and you're like, oh my God, why did I do this again? And then when you get out and you say, this is absolutely worth it because I'm feeling amazing.
Yeah, it's just like breath work. You guys are going to work up to it.
Absolutely. The next area outside of breathing that we can use to help to upgrade the vagus nerve is where else does the vagus nerve innervate? Now, we know that we've got some innervation to the ear, and we've got some innervation to the back of the throat and to the vocal cords. So what we can do is hack those vocal cords first. And easiest way to do this is humming or gurgling or chanting or singing. These are a few different ways that you can stimulate those vocal cords, the muscles around those vocal cords, which are innervated by the vagus nerve. So you can go as far as Gregorian chants and drive your neighbors crazy, or you can just sing in the car along with your favorite music as you're driving home from work, or humming before a meal with your kids to get them to calm down and get into a parasympathetic state, just as we get sitting down for a meal. Okay. Or gargling, which is a great one. Keep a glass by your sink. And every morning and every evening when you brush your teeth, toss a little bit of water in there and gargle as hard as you can. Take a sip in, gargle as hard as you physically can. This is especially if you have digestive issues. This one works really well. Take a sip, gargle it, hold it at the back of your throat as hard as you possibly can to the point where you start tearing from your eyes. That's a sign that you know that it's working. And what'll happen is you're stimulating the exhale. You're ensuring that the pharyngeal and the laryngeal muscles are turned on to their absolute maximal. And so the innervation through the vagus nerve is activated as high as it physically can go. If you do this for anywhere between 10 to 30 seconds in the morning and the evening consistently, I've had people get rid of significant health challenges just doing that practice more regularly than not.
Singing is more fun, but they're both effective.
Do both. This is the best part about it because it's also free.
It's so true. I felt so vindicated when I learned about the vagus nerve because I would, when I was feeling really ill, I would drive my car into a parking lot and just sit there with the music blasting and sing with it to try to calm myself down. Or I would sing folk songs to myself.
If we think back to it, in fact, the Hindu tradition of chanting Om is actually physically activating the vagus nerve to get you into that parasympathetic state. This is something that's been practiced long before pop music came around, right? This is something that's been around for a very long time. That frequency of Om is physically activating those laryngeal muscles that are activating the larynx to the voice box. So really cool little tool that you can use.
It's so true. Really, I think of yogis as like the original biohackers. They've been robbed of their rightful place. Wonderful. Is there any other last tidbits you'd like to share before we wrap up today?
I think if you focus on your breathing, if you focus on your motor activation of the vagal nerve fibers, and if you're still having trouble addressing something here, then adding in a little bit of electrical neuromodulation, electrical vagus nerve stimulation could be really cool. There's a ton of amazing research that's been done over the last kind of 7-8 years that's coming out. And electrical vagus nerve stimulation could very well be the biggest breakthrough in terms of stimulation of any area of our body ever, because of the range of conditions that it's been successfully able to help people overcome. So if you're still having trouble, if you're still having symptoms and challenges after doing a lot of these exercises without any success, then look into electrical vagus nerve stimulation. It doesn't need to be like an implanted device. You don't need to go through surgery. These are like 2-minute cervical stimulations that can be done by certain devices that are really effective and very well researched. So yeah, if you're interested in learning more about those, feel free to reach out.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing all this wonderful wisdom with us today, Dr. Navaz. I think it's really important for folks to see just the range of not only factors that can disrupt our health, but also the range of tools available to us that are free or very cost effective so that you can take back control over your health today. Thanks again.
My pleasure.
Thanks for listening. Go to detoxrejuvenation.com to find the links in the show notes to everything we covered in this episode. Please subscribe, review, and share with other humans who need this precious information. Let's help each other. Until next time, love, Sinclair.